Humanity is on a perpetual cycle of reinvention and regeneration to adapt to continuous changes in economic landscapes, to react to our competitors and evolving market conditions, and to overcome the challenges which limit our growth. But what if we flipped the narrative? What if we placed humanity above it all? What if our time is spent on new thinking to envision innovative solutions and pioneering ideas? Imagine a world that adapts to us and is built for us to engage seamlessly across global borders and the borders of the physical, virtual, and augmented worlds. Imagine a world where we will have unrestrained creativity, and which, powered by technology, will enable us to create unlimited solutions. We are at the cusp of a new age, where humanity is at the center and technology an enabler to empower our imagination, ideas, and dreams into a reality. Avasant is at the forefront of this innovation, empowering organizations to exceed their greatest potential. Our management consulting solutions, transformation advisory, research, and data enables our clients to hyper-accelerate their sourcing, digital, IT, and business transformation and growth priorities to realize unprecedented value. Now is the time to unleash your imagination. Embrace the opportunities of this new age. Unlock the possibilities to create disruptive solutions for a smarter and brighter future. Empower your limitless potential. Avasant, empowering beyond.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Avasant's Digital Forum, Impact of Generative AI on Tech-Enabled Services. Thank you for making the time to join us. I am Samantha Rattan, and I will be your MC for today's event. Now, before we deep dive into what will be an incredible intellectual conversation, it is my absolute pleasure to invite Avasant's managing partner, Anupam Govil, to bring greetings. Anupam?
Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. So it's obviously not a surprise to anyone anymore that generative AI has become one of the most talked about and rapidly spreading technology in our times. And with the fact that it's gained more than 1 million users within the first 5 days and 100 million within a couple of months, it has far outstripped any other technology that has come prior to it. And it's happened because generative AI has really democratized access to artificial intelligence capabilities, where any individual just with access to the internet can tap into some of the most powerful capabilities and knowledge banks that are out there, and not only search for results, but actually get a very well-curated question-answer discussion going with, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard or whichever tool that you work with. And what generative AI has done is really kickstarted a significant revolution, which is rippling across every industry, every sector, every business use case. We're seeing generative AI rapidly being adopted across healthcare, across retail, across manufacturing, banking, any industry that you can imagine. And the list of use cases continues to grow. So the question really then comes is, how do you embrace generative AI within the enterprise? What are its benefits? What are the risks? And there are risks because even though this technology is incrementally evolving at a very, very rapid pace, it still has several limitations. It has several risks, such as data privacy, hallucinations, and the fact that sometimes it can actually give you wrong results, which is not, again, a surprise, given the fact that it's essentially a large language model that is predicting the next sequence of words, images, pixels based on It's study and learning over large data sets, looking for similar patterns. So obviously, before you adopt generative AI within the enterprise, you've got to have significant guardrails. You've got to have the right tools. And more importantly, you've got to also have the right partner, a services partner who can help you go from a concept to a pilot to production environment. So today's session, really, that's where we're going to dig into how generative AI is revolutionizing and impacting the tech-enabled services space. And we're going to talk about, its impact on productivity across a plethora of functions, from application and software development to contact centers, HR, procurement, supply chain, and so on. We'll also be looking at how service providers are embedding generative AI within the services stack, how they're modulating their service delivery model, the engagement model, how they're passing on those benefits to the enterprises. And also we'll look at how enterprises are adopting AI and also expanding their budgets to embed AI within their business and IT organization. We will explore use cases across different industries. We'll talk about emerging deal structures and pricing models. And then, of course, we'll talk about the expected productivity impact on IT and BPO functions. And of course, this is based on exhaustive research that Avasant has recently released. And I would highly encourage you all to tap into that research. Thank you, and back to you, Samantha.
Well, thank you, Anupam, for your expert insights and, of course, setting the framework for today's session. I'd like to now introduce the moderator for today's panel, Swapnil Bhatnagar, the Senior Research Director at Avasant. Swapnil, it's over to you.
Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Anupam, for that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. I think, as Anupam mentioned, this is a very, very critical area, a lot of interest in this space and generative AI and how it pertains to the services industry. We've been doing a fair amount of research around this because we don't want to just stay at the surface, but we want to actually make it very actionable and figure out what it will take, what will be the nuts and bolts of actually getting generative AI going for your enterprise customers as well. Samantha, next slide. But I think before we begin that journey and come to what's happening right now, I think it's important to see how the services industry has actually evolved. We're calling it the tech-enabled services, but really when it started off, I think in the 1990s with the first wave of IT services outsourcing, the key factor that was driving this was really the value of labor arbitrage. And that did keep going forward as some of the more business-centric functions started getting outsourced, and then there was more transformational managed services that was happening. But increasingly, that value of labor arbitrage kind of flattened and plateaued, and now it's on a decline. And what's happening from the enterprise side is that they're looking for services which integrate all the latest disruptive technologies that are coming in. So it's no longer okay just to have a labor force which is more economical. There needs to be more innovation coming in. There needs to be more understanding of newer technologies. And this is a journey that has started a couple of years ago, but nothing has really disrupted or taken the mind space of everyone as generative AI has. And that's where we see this second spike that is happening around technology-enabled services, which will be driven more by innovation, more by strategy, rather than just labor arbitrage. Now, move to the next slide, please. But at the same time, it is very important to realize that this is a continuum. The services that are being delivered right now to enterprises, they are the ones in the first phase at least, which will move or find ways of using generative AI to improve those services. An improvement both in terms of more innovation, more in terms of more judgment-intensive work getting outsourced, but also in terms of productivity. So this is this slide that you're looking at right now is the result of a pretty detailed research and analysis that we've done around some of the major services areas around business process services as well as apps and infrastructure. And what we're seeing is the light blue is really the areas which have already, this is the kind of productivity gains that have already happened because of some of the technologies that were integrated in the last few years. And the dark blue bars really are what you can easily expect to come from the use of generative AI in some of these areas. It's very interesting. I think we will talk more about it, and of course, we do have this research available on our website for our subscribers. I'd just like to maybe just go back to that, Samantha. Just want to highlight a couple of areas I think which are really critical. Application development is one area where we do expect a significant improvement in productivity, primarily because this is a high value area where automation was only happening to a certain degree, only to around 25 to 44% in the deals that we work or engage with enterprises on. But if you look at subcomponents of application development, there's several areas where generative AI is going to bring down the time and effort really to almost zero. And that's going to be really disruptive for service providers and enterprises as well. Similarly, I think we see some of the other changes as well. Samantha, next slide. We are, of course, monitoring the situation, as they say. We're putting out a lot of research around generative AI and what it means, both for enterprises and for service providers. You can go on our website and get access to most of this research as well. But now, Samantha, next slide, please. Yeah. So now I think we're really getting into the meat of things today. It's very easy to just talk about a new technology coming in and changing and disrupting things. But what we wanted in this conversation was to really bring a real practitioner into our midst, so that this is not just in the air and hyperbole, but really what it means for a large organization or for a CIO who's run a multi-million, if not billion-dollar budget in the past. So I'm really excited, as should you be, to have Larry Godec with us as part of this panel. Larry is a distinguished fellow with us at Avasant and is heavily involved in a lot of work that we do, and we take the advantage of his experience and knowledge. Larry, maybe you want to have a talk about your journey so far for a couple of minutes.
Sure. Thank you very much, Swapnil. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with everybody and share what I've learned and what I'm currently doing and working on with generative AI and ChatGPT. Just a little bit of background. I was the Chief Information Officer for First American Financial, which is a global corporation, Fortune 500 organization, had a very large IT organization, several thousand, including over 1,000 IT executives, IT engineers in India. And that was a great opportunity for me to really look at all areas of technology, including security. And towards the last several years of my career, before I retired a few years back, I was really dived into emerging technology. And what I mean by that is like robotic process automation, RPAs. We had well over 100 bots in production when I left. Blockchain. We built our industry's first blockchain and got one of our competitors to agree to go onto the blockchain to actually help automate and really increase productivity in a certain area of the title insurance area. The data scientists, big data. And since retiring, when last November, when ChatGPT hit the streets and generative AI really took off, I jumped in and really learned as much as I could, and worked with Avasant, read all the materials, everything I could get my hands on, and now am consulting several large organizations, actually finding use cases, finding tools, service providers that can help build the large language models using Python or whatever, and actually then implementing those into production. So I'm excited to be part of this panel and looking forward to sharing information. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Larry. Generative AI is so new that nearly every day there's something new happening. And Chandrika, that's the second panelist that we have in this. She's been tracking the AI and advanced analytics space for several years now, and really got on the bandwagon to really understand what generative AI means, both from an enterprise side and from a service provider side. I'm sure several of you have probably already spoken to her in her other avatars. But really glad to have her also on this panel to shed some light. Chandrika, you want to give a quick introduction, please?
Sure, thanks, Swapnil. So, hi everyone. My name is Chandrika Dutt. I'm research leader at Avasant. I lead the AI automation team, as Swapnil mentioned, and along with that, I have interest in new technologies like metaverse, quantum, and so on. I have an experience of around 12 years in corporate finance and technology domain, and I really look forward to this conversation today.
Thank you, Chandrika. So let me just directly jump into it, right? So Larry, I mean, you've been a CIO for over 2 decades, and not for small firms. I mean, pretty large firm, large or complex organization. I'm sure in this period you've seen several technology waves come and go, come get absorbed and then go. What do you think of generative AI in the context of how it will change the way CIOs run their particular organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my personal opinion is that generative AI is going to be as big as the internet. So this is truly transformational and a game changer, new technology that all CIOs and all senior IT leaders are really going to have to fully embrace and learn and understand how it can benefit their business. And certainly they're going to need service providers to help them. As I mentioned, in work I'm doing with several organizations, we had to select a service provider to help build the large language model because the IT team on staff, they didn't have that knowledge and that experience. They couldn't build that model. And so, we hired a team and they're building that out and we're implementing it into production right now. So it's exciting.
Okay. So, I mean, if I could just dig a little, deeper into that, are there any specific functions or roles within the technology groups at large organizations which you think are going to be fundamentally disruptive? I mean, large enterprises, new technology is fine, but business still needs to keep going on. There are basic things which need to be taken care of, like cybersecurity or data privacy. In fact, the requirements for that are probably higher now than ever before. So are there any functions which you think will fundamentally get disrupted?
Yeah, so when I read this question, I just sat down and just started writing all the areas that, were part of my organization. And I thought, how could Gen AI impact in a positive way these areas? And so I just rattled off a list. So starting with development, coding. Gen AI and ChatGPT can be a virtual assistant to a developer. Can they replace your lead developer? No, not yet. Actually had a customer that asked me this question, said, hey, our lead developer is retiring. Can I just use ChatGPT and not have to replace them? And I said, don't you dare do that. But you may not need to hire a junior developer because you can use ChatGPT to help you or the lead developer generate code. Prompting. So this is a new role that I think is going to really expand. And I tell college students that I mentor and others, if you really want to get into something that's on the cutting edge, get into prompting. So what's prompting? Prompting is the ability to tell and speak to ChatGPT and get the exact answer you want out of it. So there isn't any hallucinations or misunderstandings from the model. And it's a certain skill set, and there's things that you can learn about how to prompt the model and how to engage with the model. So certainly data science is going to be transformed by this. Testing, the user interface development, UI. You can now just download templates or wireframes into ChatGPT and push the button and say, produce the HTML code, and out it'll come. Certainly project management, managing projects. Under the IT operations umbrella, service desk is the obvious one, but patch management, monitoring, self-healing, making sure that all the appropriate software is running across all the servers, as an example, or all your endpoints. And if it's not, making sure that it's started up. So self-healing, provisioning, new employee onboarding. So the list is, I mean, that's me just doing a brain dump in 5 minutes that I came up with a list that long. And I'm sure I've missed a number of areas that it can be helpful with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very interesting because, of course, there's a lot of hyperbole around generative AI and where all it can be used. But there's actually a global online cosmetics retailer that we're actually working with right now at Avasant, who's looking to replace their service desk almost completely with generative AI. Now, I know you did caution your clients about that may not be the best way forward, but we are actually seeing this on the ground now. There are those maverick experimentations that are happening with some of these things. So it's getting real very fast, right?
Yeah. So the one thing I would add that I cannot stress this enough, and that is that ChatGPT, generative AI, it cannot keep a secret. So don't tell them proprietary confidential information. You can ask Motorola that some of their engineers actually did that, and oops, they had some trade secrets get out. So you definitely want to set up the cloud VNets to house your copy of your model behind your firewall, so you can protect and only have your data and have your data protected.
Right. And Samsung also went through a little bit of that. So yeah, it's a very real issue. Chandrika, just coming to you, I mean, I know that you've really been having a lot of conversations with enterprises and providers. And really the question comes down to, okay, what does this really mean? When you look at the other technology advancements that have happened, and when you look at generative AI, where do you think this new technology, this falls on the productivity enhancement or the potential productivity gains chart? I mean, is this really off the chart the way we're looking at it?
I think I would like to start with, I know it's not news for this industry, but every once in a while, in our tech industry, there's a platform or architecture shift, which is in a way fundamentally, reordering the industry. So for instance, a vast mainframe software ecosystem, it disappeared when the industry shifted towards Linux in the client server model. Similarly, an entire generation of enterprise apps, that thrived in the client server era, they faded with the transition to web and cloud technologies. But never ever has, the impact has been so deep and widespread like we are witnessing now with generative AI. As this form of AI matures, it can, comprehend text from unstructured data with higher accuracy to extent that, it will negate the need for very intricate and costly tools for document processing, object detection, and even optical character recognition to quite a large extent. And if I can be blunt, it has threatened the existence of many such technologies. And that is why you would see most platforms, RPA, IDP, or CRM companies, everyone in a race to integrate generative AI within their existing platforms and applications. So I think the promise of generative AI is real. In fact, for anyone, be it marketing, HR, or customer-facing roles. And there's no doubt it will transform the traditional business paradigm and the nature of work. But as you described in your slides earlier, the impact of generative AI on the developer and the contact agent's productivity, it's going to be a lot more higher when compared to other areas. So I think it's no surprise that across organizations, as you mentioned, those maverick experiments they're running. So developers are the biggest users of generative AI productivity tools. That being said, 3 billion lines of code have already being generated using GitHub Copilot. Now, while the developer productivity has immensely gone up, more interestingly, I would say the time required to onboard a fresher, it has reduced drastically. This, in a way, it has led to evangelization of pair programming with AI-assisted development tools, and also it has made developers more fungible, across platforms. Moving on to the second area, which is contact center, I think use cases, the use of generative AI is vast, starting from speech to text, language translation, semantic search, call summarization. I think people are using it extensively across these areas. In fact, Uber has already started using generative AI for their customer service chatbots. Their agent assist capabilities to manage these common service issues with human-like interactions. Now, shifting gears to the impact of generative AI on industries, I would say, based on our research, media and entertainment has been more proactive to adopt generative AI compared to other industries. A lot of areas are witnessing huge productivity gains within this sector, especially when it comes to automating and optimizing tasks like speech synthesis or voice generation, interactive storytelling, news generation, content localization. The list just goes on. To give you some examples, Disney this year they announced that they're setting up an 11 to 12 member team internally to identify the potential of AI across its business divisions. Similarly, Gannett is also using generative AI to create short versions of their stories, covered in newspapers that could provide, easy summaries for the end users. Another area which is gaining traction is healthcare and life sciences, and that's where you will see a lot of domain-specific LLMs also emerging. That's because generative AI holds the potential to transform the traditional practices within this sector. It is accelerating drug development from a decade-long process. Um, it is enhancing patient care through personalized diagnosis and also aiding healthcare payers when it comes to data processing, use cases like fraud detection. And a lot of companies have already started using generative AI for research assistance and to also enhance the semantic search within their vast knowledge management systems.
I mean, not very surprising. I mean, media and entertainment, obviously, it seems like a very direct fit, and especially, I mean, our social media feeds have been filled with interesting memes that are now being generated. So that's a good one. Chandrika, in the beginning, Larry mentioned that service providers will have a significant role to play in this to help enterprises really adopt this at the speed and scale that they need to do. Now, what has been your sense from your conversations with service providers? How are they looking at this technology? Is it a threat to them? And in some ways it is, because it will reduce some of the traditional labor models that we have. But are they also looking at it as an opportunity? I mean, what is your sense from all your conversations?
So I think it's not new. Service providers typically view the emergence of any new technology through a dual lens of threat and opportunity. So was the case with automation, AI, and now generative AI. Initially, there's often a period of adjustment and learning for them, which can pose certain threats, especially if the technology disrupts their traditional business models, which stands true in the case of generative AI. But what I see is most forward-thinking service providers, they understand that generative AI can open doors to, expanded markets, improve efficiency, and also provide a competitive edge. And that's why they're integrating generative AI into the existing offerings. Many service providers have, done press releases around that. They are launching ready-to-use applications and solution accelerators on marketplaces with a key focus also on responsible AI. Because as you mentioned about those challenges, hallucinations, the trust and security side of it. So many providers have doubled down their focus on responsible AI through strategic partnerships or by creating a separate team unit, in this area. They are, they know that generative AI is more like a make or break situation. So in some scenarios, like, in their big accounts, they're even running free POCs or experiments to get a foot in the door. Speaking of, very recent innovations, providers are actively investing in this space. Most of them, you must have seen, announcing billion-dollar investment programs over the next 3 years and venturing into COE model with Google, Microsoft to advance their offerings in this space. So I think they're trying to balance the threat and opportunity generative AI, poses.
So let me just ask you directly, right? Are all of these billion-dollar investments, or at least the announcements, how real are they, and how long will it take for them to actually have an impact?
So, see, all these investments are not directed towards generative AI, to be honest. There's part of the funding that would get into, building new assets, partnerships, creating that whole ecosystem around generative AI. That's why, in a phased manner over the period of 3 years, because this technology is very new, not just for enterprises, but also for, providers. So as they gain better sense, they will know how to, use these funds specifically in generative AI. I think that's a wise approach as well, because generative AI is not a silver bullet, I would say. Not all problems can be solved, enterprise problems can be solved using just generative AI. So generative AI, clearly it will not replace the traditional AI that we know, but it would complement it. And hence you see these broader fundings, getting into AI. To just give you an example, if the deterministic AI that we know, it's trained on historical transaction data, fraudulent transactions, legitimate transactions, and it learns from these underlying patterns and behaviors to, identify outliers in a fraudulent transaction. But the role that generative AI plays in this process, it can enhance this process by generating comprehensive reports that can clarify, why a particular transaction was flagged. And this detailed explanation can help the financial analyst to make more informed decisions and actually learn from AI's pattern detection capabilities. So if you see, it's not just generative AI, it's generative AI plus traditional AI that's going to solve an enterprise use case or a problem.
We actually have a question from the audience directed to Anupam Govil. It's from Ravi Vitankar. And it's, do you see providers such as ServiceNow, AWS, working closely with GenAI and bringing in those 10% to 20% as part of the framework and let users build the business-specific knowledge? Anupam?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, Chandrika, to your earlier point, right? I mean, generative AI is just another layer on top of a much larger AI stack that's been built over the last 30 years, right? And the fact is that generative AI is what we call an unsupervised model, whereas what we call artificial general intelligence, AGI, is a supervised model. So in the case of unsupervised, literally it's a tool. It's like a Swiss Army knife you can use to do anything, create any use case. But you need the underlying stack, you need the right data sets to be able to achieve that. And what's happening is that all the big hyperscalers and the big tech vendors essentially are embedding many of those tools and capabilities within their technology bundle so that any user of a ServiceNow or an AWS or a Microsoft Azure can essentially leverage that without having to go out there and create their own ecosystem of technologies. So for example, AWS has recently launched Bedrock, which is essentially a fully managed service for building and training and scaling generative AI applications. It essentially has a bundle of pre-trained models, which cuts short the time to fine tune and train your LLM on a specific data set. And it also integrates with Stability AI, which, as you know, is one of the fastest growing library of Gen AI enabled applications. And it allows AWS customers to directly tap into the generative AI capabilities without having to go outside of the ecosystem. ServiceNow is doing something very similar in the area of IT ops. It's obviously enabling the AI IT ops adoption, and it has this tool called Generative AI Controller, essentially, which will assist in not just managing the ITSM environment through prompt-based queries, but also is able to enhance the search across the entire IT environment using Gen AI and bringing about a much more intelligent workflow automation capabilities. So essentially, generative AI is really spreading the impact of all the underlying technologies before that, whether it was RPA, whether it's AGI and others, to really have a very easy conversational interface and allow you to train customized data sets so that you can really narrow in on the use cases where you can drive the maximum impact.
And Swapnil, I'd love to expand on something I think was a really key point that Chandrika made when she mentioned that to service providers, generative AI really may be a double-edged sword. And let me explain that from a CIO point of view. So I put my CIO hat on. If I'm looking at a service provider that can come in and help me implement generative AI and ChatGPT, if they came in and said, oh, by the way, we actually implemented it ourselves in, say, our BPO operations. And on one hand, yes, we actually had to lay off maybe some employees, but we were able to automate, become more efficient, and also learn how to actually build the large language models and implement them into production. So for any new technology, when service providers would come in, whoever they were, and say, oh yeah, we can help you with this. And then they would send an army in, and then I'd realize, wait a minute, I'm training your employees on my dime. That's not the model I want to use. So a service provider that says, no, we've actually done it, we've implemented ourselves, and we can show you real use cases that we've done, that to me is really going to move them up to the top of the list.
That's great insight. Show us you've done it before, so that and don't train people on our dime. Yeah, absolutely. I think those are good takeaways. Now, we've been talking about this, all the good things and how this is potentially a disruptor in the positive side. But I do want to bring in a little bit of, rationalization also. Now, Larry, and you've been on that journey, and I'm sure a lot of your colleagues have been on that journey, where you realize that data is not just a byproduct of the operations, but really data can be mined to create significant differentiators for any organization. Now, with that, now you increase that to the nth degree, an exponential increase, that with generative AI, that data can create such distinct differentiators that, one company can be wiped out and one company could suddenly get a monopoly, right? This is it's a high stakes battle going on right now. Now, when this is happening, if, as a CIO, you have service providers who are working in your organization with that access, what would you think, what would be the role that you would want service providers to play, so that while they help you with adopting generative AI, they also ensure that your competitive differentiators, are protected?
That's a good question. And the first one that comes to mind from my vantage point is really helping us identify viable use cases. And so one of the clients that I worked with, I spent a day with each of the department heads, so all the senior vice presidents of each of the different areas. And when I was done, and all I did was sit with them and say, tell me what it is that you do. what does your organization do? How do you make money? It all comes down to how do you get to the bottom line? And when they explained how they made the company money, as they were talking, I was making notes and saying, well, wait a minute, Gen AI can help with that. Wait a minute, that's a use case. Gen AI can help with that. ChatGPT can help with that. And I actually came up with 98 specific use cases out of 1 week of just sitting down with business leaders. So it's fascinating. So having a service provider that can come in and say, it's not just about the technology. We can actually help from a business process optimization and really looking at the model or at the problem differently with this new tool, this new technology called Gen AI. From a data standpoint, you mentioned data, and certainly, I go back. I was a DBA, I was working up in my career for 20 years, and data has always been paramount to me. Data analytics, data sciences. It's still at the end of the day, it's all about the data, because the data is what's feeding the models. And kind of the game changer for me, kind of my aha moment with generative AI, and I was talking with somebody, a friend of mine, who's an expert in this area. And I said, look, when I was a CIO, we implemented all these bots via robotic process automation, and we picked one of the big 3 vendors, and I won't go into which one they are because everybody knows. And we're off to the races, and we had all these use cases from the business. But what we found is the majority of those use cases required the model or the bot, the robot, to read unstructured data. Well, it can't do that. RPA can't read unstructured data. It has to read structured data from a database, relational database, or an email. What Gen AI did is it can now read and pull information, extract information from unstructured environments. So images, PDFs. And to me, that really is a game changer, because now all of a sudden, all those other use cases that before I had to put on the shelf, they all come back to the forefront and say, hey, look, these all had bigger ROIs than the ones we implemented with RPA. So now let's get serious about implementing some of these. Service providers can really help with that.
So, yeah, I think, Chandrika, maybe just moving to you for a bit. Larry mentioned some use cases, 98 of them. Larry, if you can share that list sometime, it'll be great. But we've also seen some of these use cases actually getting on the ground and moving beyond the pilot and the POC stage. Now, as that happens, Chandrika, the service providers have several open questions. What does it take to win that business? What does it take to price the business? What kind of deal constructs should they offer to their enterprise prospects and customers? What are some of the things that you've been seeing around how these deal constructs are moving? What kind of pricing structures are you seeing already hitting the ground, in which you expect to come to the forefront in the near future?
Right. So I think deal constructs, they vary depending on the kind of approach an enterprise takes to generative AI. At this point of time, there are 2 broad approaches. One is model fine-tuning, wherein an enterprise, they leverage an existing LLM architecture and then customize it based on their own data, the domain data, and so on. The other way to go about it is, building proprietary LLM, which is not happening a lot right now. At this point, we see a lot of enterprises more focused on model fine-tuning, because most, use cases, as you mentioned, they are still in the experimentation stage, and very few are, moving on to pilot production. That's side of things. So for model fine-tuning, there are various deal constructs that service providers are getting into, depending on the maturity of the enterprise, and also their, the kind of problem solutions, the kind of roadmap they have for generative AI. Now, the first way to engage is, a provider can build ready to deploy, point solutions, put them on a marketplace, which are accessible through an API. So it really helps, accelerating the enterprise time to adoption. And many service providers have taken this approach, early January, February, they started launching their solutions on the marketplace for, quick wins. So these, this delivery model, it's usually subscription based, and it is focused at a particular business problem like anomaly detection or HR help desk, things like that. Another way to engage with enterprises is through consulting services, and this is something you could see all providers offering in a fixed price format. It usually varies, from 4 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the project requirements. This approach, this model is more appropriate for clients at this point of time, I would say, because based on our research, we see 50% enterprises, they are still in the exploratory phase where they're trying to understand the underlying benefits of the technology, which is the right use case for me, what are the underlying copyright, privacy, data security concerns that I have to deal with. So consulting services is, more, I would say, getting utilized from enterprise perspective. The third area, which is an interesting model, is a pod-based delivery model, which is primarily for enterprises that are mature in terms of digital, in terms of digital transformation, and they're also a bit ahead in their generative, AI game. So these are the enterprises that have already identified, certain use cases which are more relevant to them or more relevant to the industry that they operate in. These enterprises, I would say, they have the proof of value of the technology, and they also have sign off from their stakeholders to execute Gen AI projects. And hence they're getting into this pod-based delivery model with service providers. This is offered primarily in a fixed price or time and material fashion, depending on the number of use cases and the complexity of use cases. And it varies from 6 weeks to 8 weeks to 12 weeks, depending on the use cases. This is basically more commonly we see t-shirt based pricing in this format, which starts from 2 to 4 use cases per quarter and goes up to 8 to 10 use cases per quarter. And based on the enterprise outcome, expectations, based on their budgets, service providers can set up these pods, which would involve folks from business side, technology, and also people from the risk group. This format, I think it's more profitable for providers, to answer your question, because in this format, I think they're able to charge a premium pricing because of some, unique capabilities, unique roles that they have to bring in, like a prompt engineer, an LLM architect, or, sometimes in most cases, it could be a domain expert who's basically writing a prompt.
Well, we actually have another question from the audience, and this one's to Swapnil, but of course, Larry and Chandrika, you can chime in. So, will the managed services business be banished into something of an exile now that Gen AI can automate a lot of the traditional IT functions?
That's a tricky one, right? So I think it kind of connects also to what Larry was talking about earlier, right? I think it's too early to kind of shift completely to a generative AI structure, because for large enterprises, or for all enterprises, there are a lot of very, very critical functions that are residing right now, which are being managed, which are being addressed by the managed services teams that they have right now. There will definitely, I think, in the short to medium term, I think there will be an impact on the pricing and the mechanisms of delivery for some of these functions. I think managed services, I don't think will go away anywhere. I think we've seen through several technological waves that managed services continues to be there, but of course the nature of it changes. Here, it will become more about what innovation can be brought in by the service provider or the managed services provider, rather than just banishing the managed services provider. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Larry, you want to maybe?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think that's an excellent response. And I would say from my vantage point, service providers should immediately, if they haven't already, start educating their people on generative AI and ChatGPT. And to my comment earlier about, do I need to hire another developer? Right now, I would look at a service provider and say, look, if you can give me a really good prompter, somebody that can really talk to the models to get good output back, whether that be answers to business questions, technical questions, or code, I would take that right now maybe over a junior developer. So that's an area that I think service providers can really kind of get out in front of this and help large IT organizations and corporations by actually providing this new role for prompting.
I think, Larry, I think I just want to play a little, scenario out with you, right? I mean, it's not too fictional. I mean, you still play a CIO in this. So you're a CIO, and you have an existing application development contract, which you're running with maybe one, maybe two service providers at this point in time, right? Now, you've been hearing all about, pundits like Chandrika talking about productivity improvements and things like that. What would be your expectations when it comes to the renewal with some of these service providers? What would your expectations be on what should be baked into renewal contracts?
That's a good question. So from my vantage point, I would look at the service provider and say, look, our existing agreement with you is really based on a headcount model and the number of hours and people that you're providing as a staff augmentation and or building an application, a specific application from a development standpoint, soup to nuts. And that's great. But service provider, tell me how you're going to change your model to be more efficient using generative AI and ChatGPT to potentially do it with fewer people, which could potentially give me a better deal. But I would look at you as a more strategic long-term partner who really gets where the technology is going and could potentially, pick you for my renewal and or new service provider to help going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. I know we're coming close to time on this, so maybe just from a wrap-up perspective, Chandrika, what would be one piece of advice that you give to businesses who are looking to collaborate with service providers in the generative AI space?
So I think even before enterprises start to think of generative AI, they need to get their data in order. They should engage with providers to build a robust data infrastructure. While many organizations, they have made strides in processing structured data by establishing data lakes, incorporating governance processes, but a significant amount of unstructured data, that is, your documents, client conversation histories, they are unscattered, they are untagged in various repositories, which in a way, it's preventing them from being managed as an asset. Now, to run a prompt effectively on an enterprise knowledge base, enterprises must engage with providers to create meaningful linkages within their data sets. So that's one aspect. And just to go back into the past a bit, I think most organizations, they have burned their fingers when they were trying to automate a broken process. So taking cues from the automation wave, I think we should ride on to this generative AI wave with the right data, with the right strategy in place, which also involves revisiting their cloud strategy. While enterprises can run plethora of experiments, do pilots, on premise, but if they have to scale generative AI initiatives, they will have to move to the cloud. So they must engage with providers to accelerate their cloud migration roadmaps, must identify, workloads that need to be prioritized. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And Larry, maybe the same question to you. Maybe when you're on the golf course with some of your other CIO colleagues, and you have to give them some advice on working with service providers in their generative AI initiatives, what would that one piece of advice be?
Well, if I'm talking to another CIO friend or colleague, it's to look for service providers that, again, can prove to you and show you they actually understand the capabilities and how to actually implement and find use cases. If I'm talking to a service provider, I'm saying make sure to educate your staff now and create centers of excellence around providing real life solutions that, again, you can go out and sell your services much, much better.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. This was a great discussion. I think a few key takeaways for me here. Right? I think first of all, generative AI is here to stay. I think it's a disruptive technology. But of course, we are in the early stages. So we are still dealing with things like hallucinations. We are dealing with some teething issues, which hopefully will get solved in the near future, considering the kind of impact that it can bring. But if you want to really get into this space, I think you cannot ignore the basics, your data structures, your data management, how you integrate cloud, how are your business processes structured and digitized. I think that's the initial layer that you definitely need at any point of time. Of course, as an enterprise leader. And Larry, point well taken. I think, and this is probably a great insight for service providers, that if you can show something that you've implemented, if you understand the technology and it's not just, slideware, I think that will go a long way in actually talking to an enterprise and converting that into a proper project as well.
Yeah, and just one real quick, don't forget about Chandrika's comment about the data. It still starts with the data, and having data analytics and data science expertise at service providers that can come in and help organizations get their data straight is key.
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, couldn't end it at a better note. I think data is still the most fundamental block or unit of getting success in generative AI. So thank you so much, Larry, Chandrika. This was a really great discussion, and I hope everyone here also took away a lot of learnings and a lot of things that they can action fairly quickly. Over to you, Samantha.
Thank you, Swapnil. Well, what a truly incredible and engaging conversation around generative AI. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and sharing your leadership insights. As a token of our appreciation, we will be sending you a copy of our Generative AI Ideas to Action report excerpt. So look out for that. And a replay of today's session will be made available soon and shared with you via email. It's been a true pleasure being your MC. I look forward to hosting you for another Avasant Digital Forum in the future. Bye.